What I want to do as a job? I honestly don't know, but maybe be an actor.
Maybe somewhere in art or design.
I want to be a military officer because my grandfather was and he would tell me about it.
I want to be a musician in a band and tour around the world.
As a job, I've always wanted to study people, so either psychology or go into medicine in a hospital or children's ward.
I want to be a mechanic with my dad.
I want to be fashion designer for the disabled people.
I'd like to be a CEO of a film and theatre company.
Maybe I'd like to be an actor because I like being in musicals and plays.
I want to be a primary school teacher.
I want to be a race driver or a photographer.
I would love to do childcare because I enjoy seeing children grow and develop over years.
I would want to become a nurse because I really like helping people and I like science and that.
As a young person, having to choose what job you do can feel like a lot of pressure. Imagine how do you feel if the world told you that because you're different. There's some jobs you can't do.
I'm an archive assistant, so my job is primarily customer service based. So I help people with their research on property history, family history. I get excited when they get excited about their research. It's a bit of a cliche, but there's something wonderful about holding documents that are over 500 years old. That's really special. Each archive is unique. The worst thing about my job is answering telephones because I rely on lip reading. It's really challenging to answer a telephone call when you can't see somebody's face. And I get really embarrassed if I get the message wrong and I have to ask my colleagues to help. It can be very tiring because I'm talking to customers and there might be multiple conversations going on at the same time and the phone might be ringing and there's lots of distractions. As a result of that, when I have my lunch hour, I have to sit on my own and just de-stress. I get lots of support from my colleagues. I know that if, like I said about the telephone, that if I have problems, they support me with absolutely no judgment.
So my name is Kim and I'm an intervention coordinator at Suffolk. The best thing about my job, I think, is definitely the relationship that I can form with the student. I work one-on-one with the students. It's a really lovely way to get to know them. When I was younger, I wanted to become an audiologist, actually. I wanted to work with people. And when I looked into the audiologist role, it was more kind of research-based, which I felt actually wasn't for me. I don't think on a daily basis my deafness actually affects my job. I do come into contact with a lot of people. So quite often, especially if I start working with a new student, I do mention to them that I'm deaf and I mention, I need you to look at me if you're talking to me and nice clear voices. But because I work with the same students for quite a long period of time, they get to know me, they get to know what I need.
My name's Molly. I just got back from my year abroad where I worked as an English teacher in 2 secondary schools in Austria and also worked as a teacher and a researcher, sort of, for an NGO in Kyrgyzstan. I'd done some summer camp work before, so I knew that I really enjoy working with children. And the NGO work really led on from that interest in education. It's working on upskilling women in rural communities in Central Asia. I think working with children is absolutely brilliant, but it's also, especially if you're deaf, incredibly exhausting because children, they're lovely, but they don't necessarily understand why you find it difficult in certain situations, why you can't hear them when they're mumbling at the back of the classroom. The UK actually has really robust workplace laws and systems in place for people with disabilities that are nowhere near as common in other countries. In Kyrgyzstan, there's absolutely no conception of disability rights, really. And so what it came down to was kind of just getting on with it and having really frank discussions with my students, with my teachers that I was working with. And I think it's an institutional difference. It's absolutely not a difference in how much people are willing to support and how much people care.
I'm Ruth Montgomery. I'm a flautist, music teacher and artistic director for audio visibility. Well, I've been a music teacher for about 20 years and an artistic director for about 8. What inspires me to do my job is that I absolutely love music and I play the flute and I just want to share it with other people. It's a job that I've always wanted to do. In fact, I did a lot more than I thought I would be able to do. I thought that I could only just teach music, but with music there's so many other areas that you can explore and go into. If I take my hearing aids down, I will hear nothing at all. But it doesn't mean that I'm not a musician anymore. I can still play the piano, I can still write things, I can still think in musical terms, I can still clap and feel the music. I like to think of music as drawing and music has images and pictures. I like to read things, I like to see things, I like to feel things. It's not just a listening thing, it's so much more.
Hello, well my name is Eloise, that's my sign name, and I'm a playwright. So when I was in school, the National Theatre, they had a directing programme and it was called New Views. So I was part of that programme and they taught me how to write plays. So part of their programme, they offered a competition and whoever won, their play would be at the National, it would actually be shown at the National. I won. And that, to be honest, opened an awful lot of doors for me and a lot of opportunities within the theatre world, you know, and part of that was funding and it has just expanded from there. So I do feel that it's also very, very important that we have theatre, plays that are presented actually predominantly in BSL, in British Sign Language. I'm the person who's writing the play, I'm the playwright. I'm a deaf person. There's an awful lot of deaf playwrights out there. And I think, you know, I feel it's such a big relief that when I go and see a play, it's being actually signed.
My name is Alison Berry. I was a teacher for that for 43 years. I became, in the end, head of service for sensory and communication. But that included deaf children, visually impaired children, and children with speech and language difficulties. When I started, it was more of a challenge because at that time, all the teachers in the school were oral, didn't sign, and I could see myself that the children didn't understand what they were saying. Because I was one of the very first deaf teachers of the deaf, I was challenged by the hearing people right from the start. And they actually said to me, "You will never be accepted for a job. Nobody else can tell me what it's like to be deaf." So I was the only person that could say, "Hang on, I'm deaf, I know what should happen." So the more senior I got, the easier it was for me to influence what was happening.
My name is Kirsty. I'm stage. I'm doing a PhD, focusing on deaf people and disabled people and their histories. And I'm based at University of Cambridge and the British Library. When I was in America, I was researching Indigenous sign languages. So Indigenous, like native people and their experiences. So how they communicated, the signs they used every day to communicate with other people, deaf and hearing. If I'm presenting my research, like on a stage presenting, I really struggle using voice and explaining the research or questions, if they're being responded to, I really struggle to hear them, to understand what they mean. There's a lot of explaining very basic ideas of what does it mean, deaf, disabled, historically, but also now. And sometimes hearing people don't understand or don't know information linked with deaf culture or deaf community and what it means. And that can be a real struggle. Access and having equal access is really important. So advocating there to know what I must have to do the job is really important.
We asked Hannah to look into the 1911 census.
My name is Hannah Salisbury and I'm the project coordinator and historical researcher for Deaf Perspectives. So in the 1911 census, we've found deaf people doing a whole massive range of different jobs. We've got agricultural labourers, we've got factory workers, we've got shepherds, we've got an artist, we've got an architect. So the jobs we found people most commonly doing were agricultural labour. Makes complete sense. Suffolk was a really agricultural county at the time. The next most common job was tailoring and dressmaking. The deaf schools that existed at the time had a particular focus on jobs like tailoring and dressmaking and offered particular training for people in those occupations. But I think that the patterns we're seeing probably come from the places that people are living and the social classes that they're born into. So if you live somewhere like Haverhill and your whole family works at a factory that's doing map making, you're quite likely, whether you're deaf or hearing, to work in that factory making mats the same as everybody else in your family. So one of the really interesting people we found in the 1911 census is an artist called Thomas Davidson, and he lived in Walberswick on the Suffolk coast, and he had gone to one of the deaf schools and then he had gone on to an art college, and lots of his paintings survive today. You can see them if you look for his name online. Lots of his paintings are still around, and he specialised in military and naval scenes. His dad was an army uniform tailor, so I think he probably picked up on doing that kind of work from his childhood.
As you can see, there are a lot of jobs and deaf people could do and love.
So I think the idea that a deaf person can't do a certain job is an absolute load of rubbish. There is no reason on earth why we can't do the same jobs that everybody else does. Okay, we might have to do things a little bit differently, or we might need certain adaptations in the workplace, but there's no reason why we can't do a job. It's a load of rubbish.
If people are willing to drastically overhaul their conceptions of what a job is and how it's done and who does it, of course deaf people can do anything they want to do. I think it's just a case of finding the right support, of giving it a go and then readjusting and always finding more ways in which you can be supported through your experience, and never thinking I'm going to go in and ask for support and that's it.
Everybody had their own interest, their own ambition, and I think it's important to understand who we are and open the door for because we know something that you may not.